This one is not that common in the research practice here in the Philippines, but people from other countries they are practicing this. So if you will be part of the study, kumari experimental study, may extra credit yon sa course. Okay? Ayan, so let's say for example, you will part of the study about happiness. So you will going to receive an extra credit for your grades. Okay? And then so on and so forth. So may ganun siyang equitable um, incentive. Okay? And then so on and so forth. Okay? And next is dispensing with informed consent for research. One, we may dispense informed consent only on the following conditions. Letter A is when we believe that the research would not distress or create harm to participants or general welfare or when our study involves. Again, um, as I've mentioned, before you conduct your experiment as much as possible, we need to have the informed consent. But there are some research methodology or research nature that informed consent is not necessary. Let's say, for example, when you conduct your study on smiling and eye contact, did you obtain an informed consent? Di ba hindi naman? So what does it mean? If you're going to create a social experiment which require naturalistic observation, then of course, pwedeng hindi ka na nag seek ng informed consent. And also, okay, um, the study or normal educational policies, practices, curricula, or classroom management methods conducted in educational setting. If you're going to conduct your study to improve a particular curriculum or in a classroom setting, it's okay not to secure an informed consent. Number two, only anonymous questionnaire, naturalistic observation, archival, blah, 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 and then so on and so forth. Or if you're going to study a plant, a tree, and then so on and so forth, you don't need an informed consent. And then number three, the study factors related to job organization effectiveness conducted, blah, blah. If your research is to measure the effectiveness of a particular employee, okay, and so on and so forth, then informed consent is not mandatory. Okay, and then letter B, of course, when an experiment is mandated by a particular law or institutional regulation, then there's no need of an informed consent. Okay, guys, during our exam, I'm going to give case study or sample research, and then you're going to answer it whether if it is ethical or not ethical, or if it is not ethical, okay, how are you going to make it ethical? Or what are the research um, problem or a kind of research that it's not require an informed consent. So I'm going to give you exact example and then you can answer that through A, B, C, D. But the A, B, C, D are the options are very difficult to select. Okay, because as much as possible, we want you to enhance your higher order thinking skills, especially evaluation, analysis, okay, and application. Next. Offering inducement for research participation, I guess in a way we're able to touch this up. So when we may fairly compensate participants for the use of time, energy, and knowledge unless such compensation is refused in advance. So still, you can give them compensation or fairly compensate rather token, blah, 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 and so forth. But also the participants may refuse not to have the token or the possible, let's say, not compensation, let's say, token of appreciation. Okay. Yeah. Number two is we may reasonably efforts not to offer undue, excessive, or inappropriate reward. I also mentioned this a while ago. Okay. So again, the token is not a concrete enticement or inappropriate reward, okay, for the sake of a lesser attrition from your participants, especially in an experimental research. And then number three, when we offer psychological and professional services as an incentive for research participation, it is duly to clarify the nature of the services, including the risk, obligations, and limitations. So again, if your research is highly clinical, okay, and it's something to do with experimental research, it could be MDD, schizophrenia, and if you're going to employ a particular psychotherapy, it's very important in your informed consent to indicate whether the psychotherapy or any other intervention is part of their incentive for participating in your research. Okay? Ayan. Letter G, this is deception in research. Di ba we mentioned a while ago that as much as possible, if you're going to do an experimental research, you need to discuss the nature of your experiment in your participants. However, deception in research is inevitable part, which means from time to time, hindi natin siya naiiwasan because it's part of the process. It's part of the process because we need to ensure that the disclosing of such information will not help, okay, in the objective of the study. So from time to time, we do deception in research, and this is ethical. Okay, again, deception in experimental research is ethical given this premises. Okay, so number one, letter A is when we have determined that the use of deceptive techniques is justified by the study's significant prospective scientific, educational, medical, or applied value. Okay, so once again, in your paper, in your proposal, you really need to indicate the justification why there's a need of deceptive techniques in your experiment. And then letter B is when effective non-deceptive alternative procedures are not possible. So again, in an experiment, of course, when you disclose the process of experiment right away, they know exactly what to do with their experiment or with your experiments. So it's like a demand characteristic that you give to them right away what will be the response in terms of the research process or experimental process. Okay, so therefore you're going to deceive them. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, there are some proposed experiment in your batch that deception is required. Okay, so this is the essence. Okay, yeah. Number two, we do not deceive prospective research participants about their study that is reasonably expected to intervene with their decision to give informed consent. We ensure that the level of risk, discomfort, or inconvenience that could cause physical pain or severe emotional distress is not withheld from the participants. So, as much as possible, guys, if we're talking about what do you call this? Physical pain or severe emotional distress. Okay. Um, we do not do deception. If there's an aggression, deception is not justifiable. If they're able to experience physical pain, severe emotional distress, okay, emotional, let's say, turmoil, then deception in research is right away being condemned. Okay, again, ethical consideration tayo. So once again, we need to preserve the well-being of our participants. Can you follow? Okay. Next, number three, it is our duty to explain any deception as an integral feature of design and product and experiment for those who participate in research as soon as possible, preferably at the end of their blah blah blah. So again, in number three, the premise is that yes, you can do deception to your participants, okay, but then you need to disclose the deception or the deceptive technique right after you conducted the data gathering. Okay? Ayan. Letter H, debriefing. We debrief by informing the participants that they have contributed to the body of knowledge and blah, blah, blah. Again, we need to inform the participants that, hey, when you participate in the study, you can contribute to the knowledge, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So you need to what do you call this? You need to debrief them or to inform them about this. And the number two is we give participants an opportunity to obtain the nature, results, and conclusions, or even the publication of the result. Let's say, for example, your research is being published. Okay, you can give the link or the hard copy to your participants. Okay. And number three, when participant trust may have been lost due to incomplete disclosure or blah blah blah. Okay, we seek to reestablish trust and assure them that the research procedures were carefully structured and necessary for scientifically valid findings. So, what we're going to do here, which means you're going to discuss, okay, the process or the disclosure or the deception and so forth. Okay, so you need to discuss the valid findings and at the same time the need of doing those deception or not able to disclose that particular part of the experiment. So you need to fully explain that to your participants. Okay. Again, we also need to what do you call this? to maintain the trust of our participants. Number four, if scientific or human values justify delaying or withholding this information, we take reasonable measures to reduce the risk of harm. Okay. Now, there are some situation or there are some research that um, some information are not being what do you call this, informed or disclosed right away because they were going to have a significant effect on the findings of the experiment. But okay, if we're going to do that as much as possible, we reduce the risk of harm, especially if your research is connected to clinical psychology or abnormal psychology. Well, pain, where psychological, what do you call this, reaction or other signs and symptoms are inevitable, especially if we're going to use psychotherapies or other new interventions in improving their condition. Okay, there are some part that you are not about to disclose some important information and it will cost them in the process of experiment ng physical or blah blah or let's say emotional or mental what do you call this detrimental effect. But it's very important that if we're going to do that, we need to reduce the risk, okay, or minimize the detrimental effects of our experiment. Number five, when we become aware that our research procedures have harmed a participant, we act to correct and minimize the harm right away. Now, in reference to the Stanford prisoner experiment, diba? We watched it a while ago, and then some participants want to withdraw from the study, okay? And at the same time, they do not want to be harmed, okay, because of the study. But again, ano yung ginawa ng experimenter, still he continued the study. So that's unethical. So as much as possible, when a participant has experienced physical or mental harm, it's very important for the experimenter to help the participant right away or to correct or to minimize the harm. So if after debriefing the participants decided to withdraw their data, we shall respect and grant their request. Again, their data is solely belong to them. So if they wish to withdraw, not just their participation, but also the data that they produced along the process of experiment, they have the what they call this, they have the propensity to do that. Okay, because once again, that's their own data. Okay, letter I, observational research. We respect their privacy and psychological well-being of persons studied based on their observational research. This method is acceptable only when those being observed would expect to observe by strangers. Okay, like my example last time, diba? When we would like to observe the environmental behavior of the participants. Let's say, for example, we have the blue trash can, we have the yellow trash can, we have the green trash can, and we're just going to observe whether they're able to segregate their garbage properly. So if your research like that, it's okay not to have a let's say an informed consent. Okay, next. Also, this is part of our discussion in the chapter one, and it has something to do with navigating or the use of human care and use of animals in research. Okay, now we've mentioned this. Um, is it ethical to use animals in terms of research, especially in experimental research? The answer is yes. Okay, actually, not just in psychological research, but if we're going to also to go to the medical experimental research. Okay, they also utilize animals. Okay, and they relate the findings in animals to human beings. Okay, and like for example, is the vaccine for the COVID, right? That is tested first to animals before being tested to individuals. So it's the same with psychological research. What we do is we use animals, and then we what do you call this? Describe the behavior of the animals, and then we compare that or we relate that to the behavior of what do you call this? Humans. Okay, and psychology we call that animal psychology or comparative psychology. Okay, and again, once again, it is ethical to use animals in terms of research. So, what are the justification to use animals in research? So, letter A, to further increase understanding of the structures and processes underlying human or animal behavior, diba? We're able to what do you call it, witness that or read that in many psychological books, like the experiment of Pavlov, the experiment of Skinner, where they utilize animals in terms of their experiment. Okay, that will increase understanding of the specifics species used in the study. Okay, let's say for example the behavior of dogs or the behavior of cats and so on and so forth, or monkeys perhaps. Diba? And letter C's eventually augment benefits to the health and welfare of humans or other animals. Okay, like say for example, diba, um, the research on is it animal good for the mental health of individuals, di ba? Nagkakaroon, because of that research, we're able to confirm that having pets around and so on and so forth is good for our mental, especially during the COVID-19. Okay? And in return, of course, if a particular owner or a per dad is good to or he or she perceives that animals is good for her or his mental state, okay, it follows that there is a reciprocity to the animals. So not just in the benefit of the humans, but also in the benefit of the animals. Number two is we comply with current laws, regulations, and professional standards when we acquire care for use and dispose animal use in research. So again, we have current laws and regulations in terms of that. So there's another document that will specify, okay, the proper regulations and at the same time how we're going to dispose, okay, animals in terms of our research. Because again, it is inevitable that there are some animals who were being killed because of a particular experiment. Okay, later on, we're going to elaborate that. Number three, we take reasonable steps to ensure the animals used in research are treated humanely and are not exposed to unnecessary discomfort, pain, or disruption. Okay, and also, if possible, a psychology practitioner trained in research methods and experienced in care of laboratory animals shall supervise all procedures in researches of this kind. Okay, and of course, we're familiar with the animal rights, diba? So as much as possible, we need to ensure the what do you call this? The welfare of the animals. Okay, whether uh, we're going to terminate their lives or their lives will not be terminated because of an experimental research. So of course they need to be fed properly, they need to have proper ventilation and then so on and so forth. And if pain is necessary in the experimental research, anong gagawin natin? We need to minimize as much as possible the pain that we're going to experience. Okay, again, pain is inevitable with animals during experimental research, but what we're going to do is, once again, to minimize the possible pain. Number four, we make sure that all individuals under our supervision have received clear instructions and guidelines in research methods and in care maintenance and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this one is kindly set. Uh, I guess it's very easy to understand. No, important that your objective is very clear and will lead to the application value of harming the animals. Okay, for some of you who are, let's say, animal lover or is into pets, it's very difficult to absorb. But again, in the advancement of our field, yes, we are doing it. And next is we make reasonable efforts to minimize the discomfort, infection, illness, and pain of animal subject. Okay, so medyo paulit-ulit na lang din yung ethical consideration, no? And number six is we perform surgical procedures with appropriate anesthesia and we follow techniques to avoid infection and minimize the pain during and after surgery. I'm not that familiar if there's a particular research in psychology that needs operation or what do you call this surgery, okay, to a particular animal, okay. But if there is in animal psychology or comparative psychology, again we need to minimize the discomfort, infection, or illness, okay. And next is we inform surgical procedures with appropriate anesthesia and we follow techniques blah, blah, blah. Ito, sabi ko na siya. And next, number seven, only when it is appropriate that an animal's life be terminated, then we proceed rapidly with an effort to minimize the pain and in accordance with accepted procedures. I'm sure when they are formulating the vaccine for COVID-19, they tested that with rats, okay? And I'm sure that some rats died during the said experimentation process, okay? So in terms of ethics, yes, that is ethical. Okay, but again, number one, that is the only what do you call this? Possible way to run your research. Wala nang iba. Okay. Number two, that is part in the advancement of our field. And then number three, as much as possible, okay, eto, I'm going to highlight. We proceed rapidly, okay, with an effort to minimize the pain and accordance with accepted procedures. Okay, so if we're about to kill a particular animal in our experiment, again, we need to be considerate of the pain and to always minimize the effort. Okay? Ayan. Next, care for the environment. Again, na-discuss na rin natin to kanina. Okay? We shall avoid procedures, methodologies that will adversely affect the environment. Okay? And oh gosh, ang haba niya pa. Reporting research results. So number one, again, if we're going to convey the result of your study, the findings. Mm, okay, excuse me. Okay. So once again, if we're going to report the findings of your study, as much as possible, you need to convey that in the most appropriate language or comprehensible language that will be easily understood by your target population. Okay, again, the parsimonious term that we discussed last time. And number two, whenever feasible and appropriate, we consult with groups, organizations, or communities being studied the findings of our research so as to increase the accuracy of interpretation and minimize the risk of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or misuse. Now, the protocol in qualitative research is that right after you have the findings and you have a particular framework where you have themes and sub-themes, the protocol is just to return the findings to the participants and let them validate whether the findings is factual or truly related on their lived experiences. Okay? Ayan. So, yun. This is appropriate for qualitative research, but not that appropriate for experimental research. Next, number three, we are cautious when reporting results of our research regarding vulnerable groups or communities to ensure that the results will not be misinterpreted or misused in the development of social policy, attitude, and practices. Okay? And so again, if you're going to report your findings, Okay, as much as possible, we will need to be cautious, especially if it is connected with the vulnerable groups. Okay, and again, we have diba, Commission on Human Rights, right? And so it's very important that we need to be extra careful, especially if our participants are children, ano, senescence period, okay, or PWD, or pregnant women, and then so on and so forth. And research involving children, we are cautious when discussing the results with parents, legal guardians, or teachers. Again, this is very self-explanatory. If we're going to convey the results to kids, we ensure that we need to talk to their guardian. Okay, it should also be communicated to their guardian so that we're able to avoid misinterpretation or misunderstanding. Okay, and number five, this is a golden rule if we're going to do a research. We do not fabricate data. Okay, now, is there a sanction here, sir, if we fabricate data during our experiment or during our research? Yes. In USD, if you fabricate your data in research, automatically you will not be able to get your degree. Okay, so this is a serious crime in terms of research. Okay, and for some universities, their sanction is that automatically failed ka na sa research class if you fabricate your data, especially if there's sufficient evidences that you truly fabricate your data. Okay, and so please do not do that in your class or when you're doing your research. Okay. Now, number six is if we discover significant errors in our published data, we act quickly to correct such errors in correction, retraction, erratum, or other appropriate publication means. So let's say, for example, you already finished your experimental research and then you publish that. And then while reading your publication, you'd notice that there is wrong. And it could be in the figures, or it could be in the table, or it could be in whether rejecting or accepting the null hypothesis. Okay, so you've noticed that while reading it. So it's very important, according to our ethics, to correct. Okay, that significant errors right away. We can contact the journal, or the people behind the journal or the article. Okay, so it could be removed, it could be edited or retracted, and then so on and so forth. Okay, yan. Letter M, plagiarism. We do not present any portions of others' work or data as our own, even if the source is cited occasionally. I'm sure this is a very repeated concept to you, okay, during research or during your senior high classes, or junior high, senior or junior high. So, again, we do not encourage any plagiarism, okay, or plagiarize work during your research. Okay, now plagiarism is mostly what do you call this? Committed during the RRL review. So when you do your RRL review, or your putting journal articles in your research as much as possible, you need to paraphrase everything, okay, without losing the thought or the result or the findings of the experiment. And then right after that, of course, you're going to cite the author, the year, and of course, in the references or in your notes, you're going to cite them using the APA style. Okay, now there's a lot of application right now that you can use for you to avoid plagiarism. You can use Grammarly, you can use Skillbot, and then so on and so forth. Okay, next, letter N, the publication credit. Now, we take responsibility and credit only for work we have actually done and credit others for work they have actually performed or to which they have substantially contributed. Now, right now, I'm doing a research, and this research will lasted for uh, 2 years. Okay, and I have five research assistants. Now, in the research process, we're doing it right now. Um, I give them task and what do you call this, research works, and with that I acknowledge those, and that is my basis whether I'll be putting their name, whether it is just what do you call this, credit in terms of what do you call this, yung parang you just thank them for their contribution, okay? And another thing is that based on their contribution, I can make them as one of the uh, authors, okay? But not the primary author, because if the primary author automatically that's me. But due to their contribution with the research, I can make them as what do you call that? Sub-author, okay, or any equivalent term for that. Okay, so that's possible. Next is we ensure the principal authorship and co-authorship. I can make them as a co-author. Okay, yun. We ensure the principal authorship and co-authorship accurately reflect the relative scientific or professional contributions of the individuals, blah, 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 blah. So let's say, for example, in your experiment or in your research, merong multiple authors. So you can arrange your name based on the contribution of the multiple authors. Okay? Ayan. So the contribution to the work should be reflected in your publication. Okay? Kasi usually in publication, yung first name, siya yung pinaka-main author or siya yung pinaka-primary author. Okay? And next is we do not claim credit or authorship in publication that is substantially based on our students' thesis or dissertation if we do not have substantial contributions to the research beyond our regular duties as thesis dissertation mentor or advisor. Now, um, when I did my dissertation, of course, I had my advisor. My advisor is Dr. Rosalito de Guzman, is one of the famous psychologists in the Philippines, and I've mentioned this a while ago, is one of the authors of our Code of Ethics. Every time that I have my publication, I always include his name. Okay? Ayan. Why? Because the contribution of my advisor to my dissertation is very substantial. He guided me along the way. He gave me the right methodology, and at the same time, during consultancy, he is there right away and is able to validate and to edit my work. So because of that, he is worthy to be part of my publication. So right after my name, his name is the next. So which means he is the co-author of my published journal article. Okay, and then again, you're the one who will going to decide whether you want to include the name of your advisor or not in terms of your publication. Okay. Now, the guiding principle here is substantially what contribution in your paper. If you think that your advisor do not has this substantial contribution to your paper, whether he or she is your advisor, do not include his or her name in the publication or in the journal article. But if you rightfully judge, okay, that they substantially contributed to your paper, then you're very free to include their name in terms of your publication. Okay? And number four, in a public authored article that is partly and or substantially based on the student's thesis or dissertation, we shall give appropriate publication credit to the student based on the student's contribution relative to the other authors. So let's say, for example, you want to include the name of your advisor to your um, publication. Okay? So again, the arrangement should be the name of the students. It will be alphabetically arranged kasi usually if we're going to write your thesis, lahat naman kayo equally distributed yung work, di ba? And then at the end, yung name ng advisor nyo. So what does it mean? Ibig sabihin, kayo yung primary author and then your advisor is just a co-author. That's why his name or her name is in the last part of the arrangement. of your names. Okay? And duplicate publication of data. Again, we do not publish data that have been previously published and claim them as original data. So let's say, for example, you have an experimental research and you publish that. So as much as possible, you are not allowed to republish the data that you have and claim that is an original data. Okay, so there's a violation in terms of that. However, this does not prohibit the publishing of data as long as proper acknowledgement is clearly stated. Okay, so again, you need to cite it properly that the data that you've used, once again, in your experimental research is not yours, but rather, okay, you need to acknowledge it is from that research or your former research, okay, and then so on and so forth. Okay. Letter P, sharing research data for verification. It is our duty to share and not to withhold our data to other competent professionals who seek to verify and reanalyze the research results and substantive claims of our publication, provided that, okay, and so again, the data that we get in our research as much as possible, um, what do you call this? Um, we're not able to include the names of our participants. We can use codes, numbers, okay, or any arbitrary symbol for that, okay, so that if there's a professional who wish to verify our findings, especially if we're able to publish, some of the publisher, they also validate your findings or your data. Okay? Kasi yung iba nga subjected pagdating sa ano, di ba? Dinadaya nila yung findings nila. Especially if we're going to do a qualitative research. So some of the uh, publisher, ang ginagawa nila, they seek to verify the findings. Okay? So if someone wish or a competent professional or individual wish to verify your data, yes, you can do that. They can do that. Okay, especially if your data is questionable or your result is questionable, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so they can analyze, they can validate, or they can probably evaluate the data. Okay, so again, the latter obtain prior written agreement for the use of data. The latter intend to use the data solely for the purpose declared, and the latter will hold responsibility for costs associated with the release of the data. And confidentiality participants can be protected. So these are the considerations. These are the considerations in withholding your or not withholding your data. These are the four what do you call this? Consideration. So once you're able to fulfill this, then yes, others can totally verify your research findings. Okay, next, reviewer. When we review materials submitted for presentation, publication, grant, or research proposal review, we respect the confidentiality and proprietary rights of those who submitted. That's why when I publish my work, you're going to submit that to publisher, and the publisher will going to ask reviewer to check your work. And when the reviewer will be, let's say, evaluating your work, they will not able to see your name, not able to see your institution or your affiliation. Okay? And so, ano yon? Double blind peer review. So, yung mga reviewer is that they don't know exactly kung sino yung professional na sumulat ng paper na to. Okay? Sa institution tong, ano to, and so on and so forth. Okay? Ayun. Because again, if we're able to see the names of the researchers or probably the institution, it will add to the bias. Okay, whether you're going to accept or reject, or in terms of evaluating the paper as a whole. Okay, next, letter R. Okay, I guess this is the last one. Okay, letter R, limitations of study. We acknowledge the limitations of our knowledge, methods, findings, interventions, interpretations, and conclusions. That's why in your paper, In the last part, you always indicate the limitations of your study. Okay, and this is the ano. When you cited the limitations of your study, then that is also a point in terms of your recommendation. So the recommendation of your study is based on the limitations of your study. So you do not just recommend anything that you want. Sometimes recommendations are not totally part of your study, but you recommend based on the limitations of your study. Okay? Ayan. Number two, in case wherein our research touches on social policies and structures of communities which we do not belong, we thoroughly discuss the limits of our data with respect to their social policy. Okay, so again, once we touch a sensitive topic or our research findings deviate to the social policy of a particular group of people, it's very important to discuss the limits of our data. Okay? And number three is we do not conceal disconfirming evidences about our findings and views. We acknowledge alternative hypotheses and explanations. That's why, again, if you're a researcher, it's very important that you really know what you are studying. It's very important that you read numerous RRL, okay, because there are some instances, okay, that we need to have alternative hypotheses and at the same time explanations why we arrive to this particular findings or conclusion or judgment. Okay, so the veracity of being a researcher. Okay, now let's proceed with the second part of our chapter two, which is the informed consent. Now, um, this is not part of our examination next week, but before you conduct your data gathering, okay, I'll going to check your informed consent. Okay, so your informed consent should be on the context of your own experiment. Okay, now the Code of Ethics mentioned informed consent. So informed consent is a sort of what do you call this? Application of your ethical consideration. So right after you familiar yourself with ethical consideration and the nature of ethics in terms of research, then how are you going to apply it? Of course, you're going to apply that in the research process. Okay, primarily with writing an informed consent. Okay, so it is a fundamental component of experimental research and one of the cornerstones of research ethics. Its purpose is to ensure that human participants can enter research voluntarily with complete knowledge of what participation entails and that they provide informed consent prior to entering research. So once again, you're going to administer the informed consent before the inception of your experimental process. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so right now, okay, we have these guidelines, okay, on how we're going to write a good informed consent. And I borrowed this from the university's break, okay? And so this will be our uniform format in terms of our informed consent before you conduct your data gathering. Okay, so one of the requirements for you to have a signal for your data gathering is I need to check first or to validate first your informed consent. Okay, so we'll be very particular with this. Okay, and so number one, we need to know what is the title of the study, and then right after that, the principal investigator or your names. Okay, you need to include your department, CSBS, address, and then so on and so forth. Pur- Purpose of the study. So it's very important to include what is the purpose of your study. Okay, let's say for example, one of your classmates they want to do a support program for those broken-hearted students. Okay, so what is the purpose of that? Of course, their primary purpose is to help students cope up with the detrimental effects of brokenheartedness, diba? And then what are the other possible purpose or objectives. And of course, hindi lang naman isa yan, madami yan. Okay, so you need to clearly state that here in the purpose of study. And right after that, the study procedures. So as much as possible, you need to indicate the process of your study in a chronological order. Okay, so usually in experimental research, you're going to have this snowball sampling or referral sampling, and so forth. And then right after you have the ample amount of participants, then you're going to do randomization, and they'll be divided in terms of control group or experimental group, or they can be divided in terms of experimental group, and then they're going to proceed with your experimental process. It could be the session one, session two, and then so on and so forth. And then right after that, we're going to have your post test, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so once again, the study procedures depends upon the geography of your research or nature of your experiment. Also, it's very important to include the risk. What are the risk of your experiments? So if your experiment is connected with exercise, basketball, or sports, so what are the possible risks? Of course, fatigue, ano pa ba? Um, um, fatigue, what else? Okay. Yeah, of course, those are that is the number one risk in terms of that experiment. Okay, so you need to include that here. Okay, and then the benefits, of course, um, they're going to be, let's say, part of a new knowledge or body of knowledge that you want to introduce, and at the same time, um, they're able to receive a token for their participation, and then so on and so forth. Of course, confidentiality. Okay, nakalagay na dito. Okay, how you're going to preserve the confidentiality. You're going to assign codes. Okay, ano pa ba? Research notes and documents, and then so on and so forth. And then also in terms of your transcription, and then so on and so forth. Okay, you also put that in a lock file cabinet, or you're able to destroy the data, okay, or their data right after the study. Okay, yeah. So participant data will be kept confidential except in cases where the researcher is legally obligated to report specific incidents. So usually, if it is what do you call this, mandated by the law, or usually you found that there is a suicidal risk, abuse, or connected to any laws, then definitely we can disclose the data or the information behind the data. Okay? Ayan. So compensation, if there is no compensation, delete this section. Now, I guarantee you in our experimental research, we're not able to use this section, the compensation. So this will not be part of the study. But again, we do not have the compensation, but we were able to replace that with token. So there's no compensation, but we're going to give them tokens as sign of our appreciation to their time and effort in finishing our study. Okay, contact information. I guess it's very self-explanatory. Just write your name, okay, your address. No, not the address. Your name, your email, and your contact information. Okay, just write at least the contact number of your representative. It could be the leader of the group. Okay, and then number eight is voluntary participation. Okay, again, it is indicated here. What is the meaning of voluntary? Okay, what will be the consequences if they terminate their participation or withdrawal from the study, and then so on and so forth? It should be indicated here. Actually, you're just going to paraphrase this part, and then that's it. That's the voluntary participation. And of course, the last part is very important. This is the last section of your informed consent. Okay. Um, you're going to indicate that I have read and I understand, blah, 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 the consent. And it's very important to what? To ask for their signature and then the date. No need to indicate their name, just the signature. Okay? Ayan. Ayan. That's it, guys. So, any question or query regarding this? Okay. So next meeting, okay, I know exactly that the ethical consideration, especially in terms of research, is a very sensitive topic. So what we're going to do next meeting, I don't know if we're able to conduct our classes next week because of Frosh Day or Frosh Week, and then we also have this cultural blah 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 next week. So I don't know about the setup of classes next week. But definitely when we have our class, what we're going to do first is we're going to clarify your questions regarding the ethical consideration in research. And if there is a particular topic there that it's so hard for you to understand or you're not able to be eliminated with, I'm going to discuss that first. Okay, maybe a discussion of roughly 30 minutes and 1 hour. Okay, regarding the research. And then right after that, we're going to have your quiz. Okay, or exam in terms of ethical consideration. Now, I'm telling you guys, the ethical consideration in psychology and psychonutrition is very important. Okay, this is our compass, this is our moral compass, and how we're going to navigate our profession. Okay, and this is one of the things that we want to instill in your mind that as younger as possible, we teach the ethical consideration in you as our student because we know for a fact that you will be the new flesh and blood of the profession given after 4 years or 10 years. Diba? Some of you will be a registered psychometrician and psychologist. So it's very important to be grounded with this ethical consideration. Okay? And so medyo napapaos na rin ako. Okay, so again, if you have queries or questions, we can answer that during our face-to-face classes. It could be this week or next week. Okay? And also, guys, this is recorded, right? Okay, so right after this session, kindly send the link to our group chat so that I can also send it to other students or other section. Okay, because some of you are not able to attend the classes due to their medical physics. Okay, and also I would like to congratulate you guys for proposing a variety of interesting topics in the field of experimental psychology. I'm very excited with how we're going to pull it up. Okay, I'm very excited doon sa social support program in terms of brokenheartedness. I'm excited with the is that the Yokaneme yoga? I don't know if I pronounced that properly, but I'm also excited with that. Okay, the application of Pomodoro technique in basketball, I'm also excited in terms of that. Okay, so once again, okay, congratulations. Okay, is that napindot lang or you're raising your hand? Napindot lang? Okay, so I guess that's it. And again, God bless you guys and happy dinner. God bless you.
Thank you po, Sir. Bye po.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.